The Tesla was still warm when police found Margaret's body floating face down in the vacation cabin as hot tub. Her 32-year-old husband, Derek, was already 3 states away, keys jingling in his pocket, texting his 19-year-old girlfriend. "It's done. The car is yours now, baby." But what Derek didn't know was that Isabella had been planning H.I.'s murder for months. The same Tesla he killed for? It would become his hearse. Margaret's daughter had screamed at her mother just weeks before. "Mom, he's going to kill you for your money." She was right. But she never saw the second murder coming. Blood was still under Derek's fingernails when Isabella handed him that final glass of wine. He thought he was celebrating. He was dying. This is the story of how a Tesla became the centerpiece of 2 brutal murders, a twisted love triangle, and a daughter's prophecy that came true in the most horrific way possible. If you're here for the first time, welcome to the darkest corner of YouTube, where I expose the most shocking true crime cases that will haunt your dreams. I'm grateful for each of you who trusts me to tell these stories. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that button now, because this case will test everything you think you know about love, greed, and murder. But to understand how Margaret ended up dead, floating in that hot tub while her killer drove away in her dream car, we need to go back to when she thought she'd found her fairy tale ending. Margaret Harrison wasn't supposed to die alone. For 25 years, she and her husband Richard had built something beautiful, a construction empire worth $12 million, a daughter they adored, and dreams of growing old together on beaches around the world. Their love story was the kind that made others jealous. Richard would leave little notes in Margaret's coffee cup every morning. She would surprise him with tickets to jazz concerts on random Tuesday nights. They worked side by side, transforming their small home renovation business into the largest construction company in 3 counties. "We're going to see every sunset from a different country," Richard would tell Margaret as they reviewed their retirement plans. They had it all mapped out. Europe first, then Asia, maybe buying a villa somewhere warm, where Margaret could paint and Richard could finally learn to play guitar. Emma, their daughter, grew up watching this perfect partnership. Her parents never fought, never went to bed angry, never let business stress poison their home. They were best friends who happened to be madly in love after decades together. But at 3:47 a.m. on a rainy October morning, a drunk driver ran a red light and turned Margaret's world into a nightmare. Richard died instantly. The other driver walked away without a scratch. At 58, Richard Harrison was gone, leaving behind a devastated wife who had never imagined life without him, a 28-year-old daughter who had just lost her hero, and a multi-million-dollar business empire that now belonged entirely to Margaret. The funeral was a blur of flowers and condolences. Margaret stood there in her black dress holding Emma's hand, completely hollow inside. She had never made a major decision without Richard. Now she owned everything and understood nothing about how to carry on. The first year was survival. Emma moved back home, helping her mother navigate the business, the lawyers, the endless paperwork that comes with sudden wealth and devastating loss. Margaret would sit in Richard's office chair, running her fingers over his desk, whispering to empty air, "What am I supposed to do now?" By year 2, the acute grief had settled into a permanent ache. Margaret kept the business running, but her heart wasn't in it. She hired managers, stepped back from day-to-day operations, and found herself rattling around their big house with nothing but memories and Emma's worried phone calls. Years 3, 4, and 5 blended together. Margaret tried therapy, tried grief support groups, tried traveling alone to some of those destinations she and Richard had planned to visit together. Nothing filled the void where her soulmate used to be. Emma watched her mother shrinking, becoming a shadow of the vibrant woman who used to light up every room. "Mom, maybe you should try dating," she'd suggest gently. "Dad wouldn't want you to be alone forever." But Margaret couldn't imagine anyone measuring up to Richard. How do you replace perfect love? The loneliness was eating her alive. At 63, Margaret Harrison was worth over $15 million and had never felt more worthless. She'd lie awake at night, staring at Richard's empty side of the bed, wondering if this hollow existence was all she had left. She had no idea that her wealth, her vulnerability, and her desperate hunger for love had already made her a target. Derek Blackwood had been watching. Derek Blackwood was 29 years old, and absolutely broke when he first spotted Margaret's name in the local business journal as Wealthiest Widows article. The accompanying photo showed a beautiful woman with sad eyes standing next to a construction site, and Derek saw opportunity. He spent 3 weeks studying everything about Margaret Harrison. Her husband's death, her business empire, her daughter Emma, who lived across town, her habits, her haunts, her heartbreak. Derek learned that she went to the Riverside Art Gallery every Thursday evening, always alone, always lingering in front of the romantic paintings. Derek wasn't handsome in a classical sense, but he understood women. At 32, he was tall, charming when he needed to be, and had spent years perfecting the art of making lonely women feel special. He'd done this before, but never with stakes this high. The accidental meeting was choreographed perfectly. Derek arrived at the gallery that Thursday in October, positioning himself in front of a painting of 2 lovers dancing. When Margaret walked in, he was ready. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said softly as she approached. "The way they're looking at each other, like nothing else exists." Margaret glanced at him, surprised. She hadn't expected conversation. "Yes," she whispered. "It reminds me of, well, it doesn't matter." "Your husband?" Derek asked gently. He'd practiced this moment. "I'm sorry. I couldn't help but notice your wedding ring. I lost my wife 2 years ago, so I recognized that look. It was a lie, of course." Derek had never been married, never lost anyone, never felt the kind of love Margaret was mourning. But he'd researched grief, studied it like a predator studies prey. They talked for 2 hours that night. Derek listened with the intensity of a man falling in love, but he was actually calculating. Every tear Margaret shed, every story she told about Richard, every vulnerable moment she shared, Derek filed it all away for future use. "I should go," Margaret finally said, glancing at her watch. This was unexpected. "I haven't talked to anyone like this since Richard," Derek finished. "Would you maybe like to get coffee sometime? I understand if you're not ready. I feel like we understand each other." Margaret looked at this younger man who seemed to see straight into her soul and felt something she hadn't experienced in 5 years: hope. Their first coffee date lasted 4 hours. Derek had done his homework. He knew about Margaret's love of French poetry, her college art history degree, her dream of visiting the Louvre. He'd memorized enough cultural references to seem sophisticated, enough romantic phrases to make her blush. "You're so young," Margaret said, a shadow of doubt crossing her face. "Age is just a number," Derek replied, taking her hand. "What matters is connection. And Margaret, I haven't felt this connected to anyone since my Sarah died." Another lie. There had never been a Sarah, but Margaret's eyes filled with tears of understanding, and Derek knew he had her. Within a month, Derek was staying at Margaret's house most nights. He was the perfect boyfriend, attentive, romantic, passionate. He brought her flowers every Friday, wrote her love letters, held her when she cried about Richard. He was everything she needed him to be. But Emma Harrison saw right through him. "Mom, this is insane," Emma said during a heated confrontation at Margaret's kitchen table. "You've known him for 6 weeks, and he's living here? He's 32 years old. 33, Margaret corrected defensively. "And age doesn't matter when you're in love." "Love?" Emma's voice cracked. "Mom, you don't know anything about this man. Where does he work? Where did he live before he moved in here? What happened to his wife?" "He's been through trauma, just like me," Margaret replied. "He understands loss." Emma had hired a private investigator without telling her mother. The report made her sick. Derek Blackwood had a record: petty theft, fraud, a restraining order from an elderly woman in Nevada who claimed he'd stolen $50,000 from her before disappearing. "Mom, please look at this," Emma begged, sliding the investigator's file across the table. "He's done this before. He targets older women with money. He's a con artist." Margaret picked up the file and threw it in the trash without opening it. "How dare you spy on the man I love?" she shouted. "You're jealous because I'm finally happy again." "I'm terrified because you're being manipulated," Emma shouted back. "Dad wouldn't want this for you. Don't you dare speak for your father." Margaret's face was red with fury. "Richard would want me to be happy. Derek makes me feel alive again. He makes me feel beautiful and loved, and he's going to rob you blind or worse." Emma grabbed her mother's shoulders. "Mom, please, I'm begging you. Something is wrong with this man. I can feel it." But Margaret was too far gone. Derek had spent months making her feel like a desirable woman instead of a grieving widow. He'd given her back her sense of worth, her hope for the future. She wasn't about to let Emma's paranoia destroy the first happiness she'd found since Richard's death. The final confrontation came 3 months later, when Emma made a discovery that would haunt her forever. Emma had stopped by the house unexpectedly to drop off some documents for her mother's signature. Margaret was at a doctor's appointment, but Derek's car was in the driveway. Emma used her key, planning to leave the papers on the kitchen counter. She found Derek in the master bedroom, going through her mother's jewelry box. "What are you doing?" Emma gasped. Derek spun around, Margaret's diamond necklace in his hands. For just a moment his mask slipped, and Emma saw something cold and calculating in his eyes. Then the charm snapped back into place. "Emma, you scared me. I was just your mother asked me to get this necklace cleaned for her birthday surprise." The lie rolled off his tongue smoothly, but Emma noticed he was sweating. And the necklace wasn't the only piece of jewelry scattered on the bed. "Get out," Emma said quietly. "What?" "Get out of this house, now." Derek stepped closer, and suddenly Emma was very aware that they were alone. "Emma, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding is that my mother thinks you love her." Emma's voice was steadier than she felt. "But I know what you are." Derek's expression shifted subtly. The fake warmth disappeared. "Your mother is a grown woman," he said softly. "She can make her own choices, and she's chosen me." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. That night, Emma tried one last time to warn her mother. But Margaret had already heard Derek's version of events. "He was getting my necklace cleaned," Margaret screamed. "And you accused him of stealing. How could you be so cruel?" "Mom, he's lying to you about everything." "No, Emma, you're the one who's lying. You've been trying to sabotage my happiness from the beginning because you can't stand to see me move on from your father. That's not true, and you know it." "I want you to leave," Margaret said coldly. "And don't come back until you can apologize to Derek and accept that he is going to be my husband." Emma stared at her mother in shock. "Husband? He proposed tonight. We're getting married next month." Emma felt the world tilt. "Mom, please, I'm begging you one last time. This man is going to hurt you." "The only person hurting me is you," Margaret replied. "Derek loves me. He wants to spend his life making me happy. If you can't accept that, then we have nothing more to say to each other." Emma left that night knowing she might never see her mother alive again. She had no idea that Derek's 19-year-old girlfriend Isabella was already planning both their murders. Isabella Martinez was beautiful in the way that makes older women feel threatened and older men make fools of themselves. At 19, she had the kind of confidence that comes from always getting what she wants, and what she wanted was money. She'd been Derek's girlfriend for almost 2 years, long before he'd ever heard of Margaret Harrison. Isabella was a psychology major at the local community college, which made her think she understood people better than she actually did. But she was smart enough to see Derek for what he was, a small-time con artist with big dreams and no real plan. "You're thinking too small," Isabella told Derek one night as they lay in the cheap motel room where they met twice a week. "These old ladies you charm for a few thousand here and there, that's nothing. Think bigger." Derek was intrigued. Isabella had a ruthless streak that both excited and frightened him. "What did you have in mind?" Isabella smiled. "Marriage, murder, inheritance." She said it so casually, like she was discussing the weather. "You're talking about killing someone," Derek said, though he didn't sound horrified. He sounded curious. "I'm talking about getting rich," Isabella corrected. "The killing is just logistics." They started planning that night. Isabella would research wealthy widows in the area, while Derek perfected his grieving widower persona. They'd find the perfect mark, Derek would seduce and marry her, and then they'd arrange a tragic accident. "What about afterward?" Derek asked. "How do we explain us?" Isabella had thought of that too. "We don't. You disappear for a while, play the grieving husband. I stay in school, keep my head down. After a year or so, we meet at some coffee shop, fall in love, and live happily ever after on your inheritance." It was Isabella who found Margaret's name in that business journal. Isabella who researched her habits, her vulnerabilities, her wealth. Isabella who coached Derek on exactly what to say to make Margaret fall in love with him. "Tell her about your dead wife," Isabella instructed. Make up something tragic, car accident, cancer, whatever. Women like her eat that shit up. Derek was a good student, but Isabella was the mastermind. She watched from a distance as Derek courted Margaret, feeling a mixture of pride and impatience. Pride because her plan was working perfectly. Impatience because she wanted Margaret dead and Derek rich as quickly as possible. She's got a Tesla Model S, Derek told Isabella one night. Brand new, $60,000 car. Isabella's eyes lit up. She'd been taking the bus to college, working part-time at a restaurant to pay rent on her studio apartment. The idea of driving a Tesla while her classmates struggled with student loans was intoxicating. "Promise me I can have the car," she said. "When she's dead, you can have whatever you want," Derek replied. But Isabella was already planning something Derek didn't see coming. She'd been researching more than just how to commit the perfect murder. She'd been researching how to get away with it afterward. And every scenario she ran through her head ended the same way. Derek was a liability. He was impulsive, emotional, prone to making mistakes when he was stressed. He talked too much when he drank. He kept souvenirs from his cons, including photos and jewelry from previous victims that could tie him to other crimes. Derek was useful for the seduction phase, but after Margaret was dead, he became a loose end. Isabella started planning Derek's murder before Margaret's was even committed. She researched untraceable poisons, studied how to create alibis, learned about digital forensics and how to avoid leaving electronic evidence. Her psychology classes were actually helpful. She understood how to manipulate Derek's emotions, how to make him trust her completely, even as she planned his destruction. "I love you," Derek would tell her during their secret meetings. "I love you too," Isabella would reply, and she'd gotten so good at lying that she almost believed it herself. The night Derek proposed to Margaret, Isabella celebrated alone in her apartment with a bottle of cheap champagne and a notebook full of murder plans. Phase 1. Derek kills Margaret and inherits her fortune. Phase 2. Isabella kills Derek and inherits everything through a will she'd convince him to sign. Phase 3. Isabella disappears to start a new life with $15 million and a Tesla. It was beautiful in its simplicity. Derek called her that night, giddy with excitement. She said yes. "We're getting married next month." "That's perfect, baby," Isabella purred into the phone. "Soon we'll have everything we ever dreamed of." She wasn't lying about that part. Isabella would have everything she'd ever dreamed of. Derek just wouldn't be alive to share it. The wedding was small, just Margaret, Derek, and a justice of the peace at the courthouse. Emma wasn't invited. Derek had made sure Margaret's relationship with her daughter was completely severed. He couldn't risk Emma interfering with the final phase of the plan. Isabella watched from across the street as her boyfriend married his victim. In 6 months, both of them would be dead, and Isabella would be rich. She was 19 years old and had never felt more powerful in her life. The honeymoon period lasted exactly 3 weeks. Then Derek started planning Margaret's murder in earnest. "The cabin in the mountains," he told Isabella during one of their secret meetings. "I'm going to take her there for our 1-month anniversary. Make it look like she slipped and drowned in the hot tub." "Drowning can be tricky," Isabella said thoughtfully. "You'll need to make sure there are no defensive wounds, no signs of a struggle." "I'll drug her first," Derek replied. "Slip something in her wine, wait for her to get drowsy, then hold her under. She'll be too weak to fight back." Isabella nodded approvingly. She'd researched this exact scenario. "What about afterward?" she asked. "I call 911, play the devastated husband." She was drinking. She was depressed about her daughter not speaking to her. She must have gotten confused and slipped. "And then?" Derek leaned closer. "Then I collect my $15 million, and we disappear together." Isabella smiled and kissed him deeply. "I can't wait," she whispered against his lips. She meant it. She couldn't wait for Derek to kill Margaret so she could kill Derek. The perfect crime was about to become a double murder. Margaret Harrison had never been happier than she was during those first few weeks of marriage. Derek was everything she dreamed of. Attentive, romantic, passionate about their future together. He'd even started talking about them renewing their vows on their first anniversary, maybe somewhere tropical where they could start fresh. "I want to take you away this weekend," Derek said one morning over coffee. "Somewhere special. Just the two of us." Margaret's face lit up. "Where?" "It's a surprise." Pack warm clothes and something beautiful for dinner. I want to spoil my wife." The cabin was perfect, secluded, romantic, with a hot tub overlooking the mountains and a fireplace for cozy evenings. Margaret felt like she was living in a fairy tale as Derek carried her bags inside and kissed her in the doorway. "This is beautiful," she breathed, looking around at the rustic luxury. "Not as beautiful as you," Derek replied, and Margaret blushed like a teenager. That first night, they sat by the fire, drinking wine and talking about their future. Derek was especially attentive, refilling Margaret's glass whenever it got low, encouraging her to relax and enjoy herself. "I feel so lucky," Margaret said, her words slightly slurred from the wine. "I never thought I'd find love again after Richard." "You deserve to be loved," Derek replied, watching her carefully. The drugs were starting to take effect. Her pupils were dilated, her movements becoming sluggish. "I'm feeling a little dizzy," Margaret said, pressing her hand to her forehead. "Too much wine," Derek said gently. "Why don't we go relax in the hot tub? The fresh air will help." Margaret nodded, trusting completely. Derek helped her change into her swimsuit, noting how unsteady she was on her feet. The sedative was working perfectly. The hot tub was already heated, steam rising from the water into the cold mountain air. Margaret sank into the warmth with a sigh of contentment. "This is perfect," she murmured, leaning back against the edge. Derek slipped into the water beside her, his heart racing. This was it. After months of planning, years of dreaming, he was minutes away from being a millionaire. "Margaret," he said softly. Her eyes were closed, a peaceful smile on her face. "I need you to know that I love you." "I love you too," she whispered. Those were the last words Margaret Harrison ever spoke. Derek's hands found her shoulders. Margaret's eyes opened in confusion as he pushed her forward, forcing her head under the water. She tried to struggle, but the drugs had made her weak, helpless. Derek whispered, holding her down as she thrashed weakly. "It'll be over soon." Margaret's final moments were terror and betrayal. The man she'd trusted with her heart, her body, her fortune was killing her. She tried to scream, but only inhaled water. She tried to fight, but her limbs wouldn't obey. Derek held her under for 3 minutes after she stopped moving, making sure. When he finally let go, Margaret's body floated face down in the hot tub. Her gray hair spread around her like seaweed. Derek climbed out of the water, his entire body shaking. He'd done it. Margaret Harrison was dead, and in a few hours he'd be the grieving widower inheriting everything. He called Isabella first, not 911. "It's done," he said, his voice hollow with shock and adrenaline. "How do you feel?" Isabella asked. "Rich," Derek replied, and they both laughed. Derek waited 20 minutes before calling 911, giving himself time to get his story straight and practice his devastated husband act. 911, what's your emergency? "My wife." Derek screamed into the phone. "She's in the hot tub. She's not breathing." "Oh God, I think she's dead." The paramedics found Derek giving Margaret CPR, sobbing and begging her to come back to him. His performance was perfect, the devoted husband trying desperately to save the woman he loved. Margaret was pronounced dead at 11:47 p.m. on a Friday night in November. Cause of death: accidental drowning, likely due to alcohol impairment and possible medical episode. Derek inherited everything. 2 weeks later, he drove Margaret's Tesla to meet Isabella at their usual motel. She was waiting for him with champagne and a smile that made his heart race. "We did it," Derek said, pulling her into his arms. "We're rich, baby, $15 million. "And the car?" Isabella ran her hands over the Tesla's sleek exterior. "All yours," Derek promised. "Everything's ours now." They celebrated that night like they were already living their happily ever after. Derek had no idea that Isabella had been preparing for this moment for months. She'd convinced him to write a will, leaving everything to her, in case something happens. She'd researched the perfect poison, ricin extracted from castor beans, virtually undetectable in an autopsy, unless specifically tested for. She'd created an airtight alibi for the night she planned to kill him. "I love you so much," Derek said, as Isabella poured him another glass of champagne. "I love you too," Isabella replied, adding the ricin to his drink while his back was turned. Derek drank the poisoned champagne in 3 swallows. "You know what?" he said, suddenly energized. "Let's go for a drive in the Tesla. I want to see how fast it goes. Let's wait a little bit, Isabella suggested. I want to enjoy this moment. They made love one last time while the poison worked its way through Derek's system. He started feeling sick around 2 a.m. Nausea, stomach, cramps, dizziness. I think I ate something bad, he groaned, curled up in the motel bed. Poor baby, Isabella cooed, stroking his hair while calculating how much longer he had to live. By morning, Derek was vomiting blood and couldn't stand up. Isabella drove him to the hospital, playing the concerned girlfriend perfectly. He was fine last night, she told the doctors. We were celebrating our engagement. He just started feeling sick a few hours ago. Derek died 3 days later from what doctors assumed was a severe case of food poisoning. He was delirious from fever and pain, but in his final moments he looked at Isabella with sudden clarity. You poisoned me, he whispered. Isabella leaned close to his ear. I learned from the best, she replied. Derek Blackwood died at 6:23 a.m. a Tuesday morning, alone except for the woman who'd murdered him. Isabella inherited everything that night: Margaret's fortune, Derek's life insurance policy, and a brand new Tesla Model S. She was 19 years old and worth over $15 million, but she'd made one crucial mistake. Emma Harrison hadn't spoken to her mother in 4 months when the police called to tell her Margaret was dead. The officer was kind but professional. There had been a tragic accident at a mountain cabin. Her mother had drowned in a hot tub, and Emma needed to come identify the body. Derek waited 20 minutes before calling 911, giving himself time to get his story straight and practice his devastated husband act. 911, what's your emergency? My wife. Derek screamed into the phone. She's in the hot tub. She's not breathing. Oh God, I think she's dead. The paramedics found Derek giving Margaret CPR, sobbing and begging her to come back to him. His performance was perfect, the devoted husband trying desperately to save the woman he loved. Margaret was pronounced dead at 11:47 p.m. on a Friday night in November. Cause of death: accidental drowning, likely due to alcohol impairment and possible medical episode. Derek inherited everything. 2 weeks later, he drove Margaret's Tesla to meet Isabella at their usual motel. She was waiting for him with champagne and a smile that made his heart race. We did it, Derek said, pulling her into his arms. We're rich, baby, $15 million. And the car? Isabella ran her hands over the Tesla's sleek exterior. All yours, Derek promised. Everything's ours now. They celebrated that night like they were already living their happily ever after. Derek had no idea that Isabella had been preparing for this moment for months. She'd convinced him to write a will, leaving everything to her, in case something happens. She'd researched the perfect poison, ricin extracted from castor beans, virtually undetectable in an autopsy, unless specifically tested for. She'd created an airtight alibi for the night she planned to kill him. I love you so much, Derek said, as Isabella poured him another glass of champagne. I love you too, Isabella replied, adding the ricin to his drink while his back was turned. Derek drank the poisoned champagne in 3 swallows. You know what? He said, suddenly energized. Let's go for a drive in the Tesla. I want to see how fast it goes. Let's wait a little bit, Isabella suggested. I want to enjoy this moment. They made love one last time while the poison worked its way through Derek's system. He started feeling sick around 2 a.m. Nausea, stomach, cramps, dizziness. I think I ate something bad, he groaned, curled up in the motel bed. Poor baby, Isabella cooed, stroking his hair while calculating how much longer he had to live. By morning, Derek was vomiting blood and couldn't stand up. Isabella drove him to the hospital, playing the concerned girlfriend perfectly. He was fine last night, she told the doctors. We were celebrating our engagement. He just started feeling sick a few hours ago. Derek died 3 days later from what doctors assumed was a severe case of food poisoning. He was delirious from fever and pain, but in his final moments he looked at Isabella with sudden clarity. You poisoned me, he whispered. Isabella leaned close to his ear. I learned from the best, she replied. Derek Blackwood died at 6:23 a.m. a Tuesday morning, alone except for the woman who'd murdered him. Isabella inherited everything that night: Margaret's fortune, Derek's life insurance policy, and a brand new Tesla Model S. She was 19 years old and worth over $15 million, but she'd made one crucial mistake. Emma Harrison hadn't spoken to her mother in 4 months when the police called to tell her Margaret was dead. The officer was kind but professional. There had been a tragic accident at a mountain cabin. Her mother had drowned in a hot tub, and Emma needed to come identify the body. Emma drove to the morgue in shock, part of her still hoping this was all a terrible mistake. But when they pulled back the sheet, there was her mother, pale and still, looking smaller than Emma remembered. Derek played his role perfectly at the funeral. He sobbed at the graveside, gave a beautiful eulogy about Margaret's kindness and beauty, accepted condolences with the grace of a man destroyed by grief. But Emma watched him carefully, and something felt wrong. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said to Derek after the service, studying his face. "She loved you so much," Derek replied, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Her biggest regret was that you two weren't speaking." Emma wanted to believe him. Part of her even felt guilty. Maybe she'd been wrong about Derek. Maybe he really had loved Margaret. Maybe her mother had died knowing her only daughter thought the worst of her new husband. But then Emma went back to Margaret's house to collect some personal items, and she found Derek packing Margaret's jewelry into boxes. "What are you doing?" Emma asked. Derek looked up, startled. "Oh, Emma, I didn't hear you come in. I was just organizing Margaret's things. This is so hard." "You're packing her jewelry?" "For safekeeping," Derek said quickly. "Some of these pieces are very valuable. I thought I should put them in a safety deposit box." Emma noticed he was only packing the expensive pieces, her mother's diamond necklace, the emerald earrings that had been her grandmother's, the gold bracelet Richard had given Margaret for their 20th anniversary. "What about her wedding ring from my father?" Emma asked. Derek's hand went to his pocket unconsciously. "I haven't seen it," but Emma had. She'd seen it on Margaret's finger at the funeral. Now it was gone. That night, Emma hired the same private investigator who'd uncovered Derek's criminal history. This time she wanted him to investigate Margaret's death. "I know it sounds crazy," she told the investigator, "but something doesn't feel right about this accident." The investigator was thorough. He interviewed the paramedics who'd responded to Derek's 911 call, examined the police report, talked to the motel clerk who seen Derek with a young woman just 2 days after Margaret's funeral. "Mrs. Harrison," he said when he called Emma with his findings, "I think you should sit down." The investigator had uncovered Isabella's existence, Derek's secret girlfriend who'd been seen with him multiple times during his marriage to Margaret. He'd found evidence of Derek's previous cons, including 2 elderly women in other states who died under suspicious circumstances after marrying much younger men. Most damning of all, he discovered that Derek had taken out a $1 million life insurance policy on Margaret just weeks after their wedding. Emma took the evidence to the police, but they were reluctant to reopen what seemed like an accidental death case. Derek was a grieving widower, they said. His relationship with the young woman had started after Margaret's death. The life insurance policy wasn't unusual for a new husband. But then Derek died. The call came at 3 a.m. Derek Blackwood had been hospitalized with severe food poisoning and died from organ failure. Emma felt a mixture of emotions she couldn't sort through. Relief that her mother's killer was gone. Confusion about what this meant for the investigation. The police were more interested now. 2 suspicious deaths connected to the same man was worth a second look. Isabella made her first mistake at Derek's funeral. Emma attended, watching from the back as the 19-year-old girl threw herself on Derek's casket, sobbing about their lost love and future together. But Emma had done her homework. She knew Isabella had been Derek's girlfriend for 2 years, throughout his entire relationship with Margaret. The Grieving Woman Act wasn't fooling anybody who knew the truth. Isabella's second mistake was the Tesla. She'd been driving Margaret's car around town, telling people Derek had left it to her in his will. But Emma knew her mother would never have wanted that car to go to anyone but her own daughter. Emma contested the will and demanded an investigation into both deaths. The digital forensics team found everything Isabella thought she'd hidden text messages between her and Derek planning Margaret's murder, internet searches for untraceable poisons, research into ricin extraction and administration. Most damning of all, they found Isabella's journal, hidden in her apartment, detailing her entire plan from the beginning. Phase 1 complete. Margaret is dead and Derek inherited everything. Read 1 entry. Phase 2 in progress. Derek trusts me completely and has signed the will leaving everything to me. Phase 3 soon. Derek will have his final drink tonight. Isabella was arrested on a Tuesday morning as she sat in Margaret S. Tesla in the parking lot of her community college. She was on her way to psychology class, carrying textbooks bought with money from Margaret's inheritance. The arrest video showed Isabella's complete breakdown when she realized her perfect plan had fallen apart. The composed, manipulative psychology student turned into a sobbing teenager, begging the officers to let her explain. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she screamed as they put her in handcuffs. "Derek made me do it. He said he'd kill me if I didn't help." But the evidence told a different story. Isabella's journal, her internet searches, her methodical planning, everything pointed to a young woman who de-orchestrated 2 murders for money and gotten away with it for months. In the interrogation room, faced with overwhelming evidence, Isabella finally told the truth. "I never loved Derek," she admitted. "He was just useful. I needed someone to seduce Margaret and kill her for the money. But I always planned to kill him afterward. I'm not sharing $15 million with some pathetic loser." The detective was sickened by Isabella's casual cruelty. "Margaret Harrison trusted you to care about her husband. She died thinking Derek loved her." Isabella shrugged. "Margaret was old and lonely and stupid. She wanted to believe a young man could love her, so she ignored all the red flags. That's not my fault. And Derek was greedy and dumb. He thought he was using me, but I was using him. He killed Margaret with his own hands, but it was my plan from the beginning. I just let him think he was in charge." Emma sat in the courtroom every day during Isabella's trial, staring at the young woman who destroyed her family. Isabella showed no remorse, no emotion, except anger at being caught. The prosecution painted a picture of a cold-blooded killer who'd manipulated a weak man into committing murder, then eliminated him to claim the prize for herself. Isabella's defense attorney tried to argue that she'd been coerced by Derek, that she was a victim of an older man's manipulation. But the evidence was too clear, Isabella's own words too damning. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Guilty on charges of conspiracy, fraud, and theft. Isabella Martinez was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the judge read the sentence, Isabella finally showed emotion. Not remorse, but rage. She screamed at Emma across the courtroom. "Your mother was a pathetic old fool who deserved to die." Emma stared back at her mother-see killer and felt nothing but pity for a young woman who'd thrown away her entire life for money and a car. The investigation revealed the true scope of Isabella's manipulation. Her journal contained detailed psychological profiles of both Margaret and Derek, analyzing their weaknesses and exactly how to exploit them. She'd studied Margaret for weeks before Derek ever approached her, learning about her grief, her loneliness, her desperate need to feel loved again. Isabella had coached Derek on exactly what to say, how to mirror Margaret's interests, even which flowers to bring her. "Subject shows classic signs of prolonged grief and social isolation," read 1 journal entry. "Extremely vulnerable to love-bombing techniques. Daughter represents only obstacle, must be eliminated from equation through systematic alienation." Derek had been just as carefully manipulated. Isabella had researched his criminal history, his failures, his desperate need for easy money. She'd played to his ego while controlling every aspect of the plan. "Derek believes he's the mastermind, but he's merely the weapon," another entry read. "His emotional attachment to me makes him easy to control. We'll eliminate him immediately after inheritance is secured." Most chilling of all were Isabella's contingency plans. She'd researched how to fake her own death if caught, how to frame other people for the murders, even how to kill Emma if Margaret's daughter became too suspicious. "Emma Harrison represents potential threat," Isabella had written. "If investigation becomes problem, arrange accident. Make it look like suicide from guilt over mother's death." Emma realized she'd been closer to death than she'd ever known. The final twist came during Isabella's sentencing hearing. Prison psychologists had evaluated her, and their findings were terrifying. Isabella Martinez was a textbook psychopath, incapable of empathy, remorse, or genuine human connection. At 19, she'd already demonstrated the planning ability and cold ruthlessness of a serial killer. In my 30 years of forensic psychology, the court-appointed psychiatrist testified, I've never encountered someone so young with such sophisticated manipulation skills and complete absence of conscience. If she hadn't been caught, Isabella Martinez would have killed again. The Tesla that had started it all was sold at auction. Emma couldn't bear to keep it, knowing it had been purchased with her mother's blood. The money went to a foundation for domestic violence victims, women who, like Margaret, had trusted the wrong man and paid the ultimate price. Emma kept only one thing from her mother's estate, Richard's wedding ring, which Derek had tried to pawn but hadn't been able to sell before his death. She wore it on a chain around her neck, a reminder of the love her parents had shared and the tragedy that followed. My mother ignored every red flag because she was desperate to feel loved again, Emma said in her victim impact statement. Isabella and Derek preyed on that desperation. They turned her greatest strength, her capacity for love, into the weapon that killed her. Isabella sat stone-faced through Emma's statement, showing no emotion even when Emma broke down, describing her mother as final months of happiness before the murder. Today, Isabella Martinez sits in a maximum security prison, serving life without parole. She's 21 years old now, and unless the law changes, she'd die behind bars. She still maintains her innocence in interviews, claiming Derek forced her to participate in his schemes. But prison psychologists report that she shows no genuine remorse and continues to blame her victims for being too stupid to live. Derek Blackwood was buried in an unmarked grave. No one claimed his body, no one mourned his death. He'd spent his life using people and died used by someone even more ruthless than himself. Margaret Harrison was laid to rest beside her first husband Richard in the cemetery, where they planned to be buried together. Emma visits their graves every month, telling her parents about her life and asking for forgiveness for not being able to protect her mother from the monsters who killed her. The case changed how police investigate deaths involving new marriages and large inheritances. Margaret's law, passed in her memory, requires mandatory waiting periods for life insurance policies on new spouses and automatic investigations when someone inherits more than $1 million from a spouse who dies within 2 years of marriage. But no law can protect us from our own desperation for love, from the willingness to ignore red flags when someone tells us exactly what we want to hear. Emma Harrison learned that lesson too late to save her mother. But maybe by sharing Margaret's story, she can save someone else. Trust your instincts, Emma says now. If your family is warning you about someone, listen. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And remember, real love doesn't ask you to choose between the person you re-dating and everyone else who cares about you. My mother chose Derek over me because she thought that's what love looked like. She died believing he loved her. She never knew that both her husband and his girlfriend were counting her money while she took her last breath. The most heartbreaking detail from the case files? Margaret had started writing in a diary during those final weeks of her life, documenting her happiness with Derek and her hope for their future together. The last entry, written the day before Derek took her to the cabin, read, I finally feel like myself again. Derek makes me remember who I was before grief consumed me. Tomorrow we're going away together, just the two of us. I can't wait to start our real life as husband and wife. I love him so much it scares me sometimes, but good scared, like jumping out of an airplane. Like being alive again. Margaret Harrison jumped out of that airplane believing someone would catch her. Instead, Derek Blackwood and Isabella Martinez watched her fall. This case shows us how predators identify and target vulnerable people, especially those dealing with grief and loneliness. Margaret Harrison's wealth made her a target, but her broken heart made her a victim. If this story has opened your eyes to the warning signs of manipulation and predatory behavior, please share this video with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe and hit that notification bell for more true crime cases that expose how monsters hide among us. And remember, if you ever in a situation where your family is begging you to reconsider a relationship, ask yourself why. Real love doesn't require you to choose between your partner and everyone else who cares about your safety. Let me know in the comments, what red flags did you spot that Margaret missed? What would you have done differently? Your insights might help someone else recognize danger before it's too late. Margaret Harrison's story didn't have to end in murder, but maybe sharing it can prevent the next tragedy. I'll see you in the next case. Stay safe out there.